Hey, it's Juck.
I believe Ohio State has the edge. And I believe they have more areas on the Ohio State team where they are superior to Georgia. And I think Ohio State is going to be the odds-on favorite.
We got an update. Let's get it. And I don't think he's going to throw the ball as much as he thinks he's going to throw the ball now that Chip Kelly's on board. And I'm happy about that. More quarterback.
The truth is Ryan Day has made a change philosophically, but it's none of those.
You all know who wins. LSU is the drunkest fan base in the country. So J.J. Smith, it is very apparent that, look, if you haven't seen this catch, now the degree of difficulty here with who I think is going to be a first-round draft pick, holding his shoulder pad. Look at the still shot I took before the catch. So he's got him up there by the pad. He's blanketing him. I mean, absolutely blanketing him. JJ throws up the catcher's mitt. Doesn't even look like he can see where the ball is. Just so smooth, so incredibly talented, so big, so strong. Look at this thigh. Would you look at this thigh? This guy could play and be effective in the NFL right now. It's unbelievable. And you see how stressful that was coming down the stretch with Brian Day and Brian Hartline, because they knew what was coming more than we did. I mean, obviously we saw the film, and yes, the tape on this guy, he looks better than any of the big time best wide receivers we've seen, in my opinion, since Randy Moss, whose senior year was now 29 years ago. He looks better than everybody. Better than Julio, better than AJ Green, better than Calvin Johnson, better than all of them coming out of high school. He looks better than all of them. And none of them looked like this as a freshman. Not a single one. What is this guy's future? He has a chance to be one of the best ever. That's not hyperbolic. He's that crazy. It's just crazy. And it's just like, man, we got this guy for 3 years. Imagine how much help he's going to be to this struggling quarterback. If we have a struggling quarterback. Unfortunately, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be yet, but we're going to get to see next Saturday coming up here. Now, I was going to go to the spring game. I'm starting to reconsider. I think what I may do is watch it on Fox, which is going to be fun, and then go live directly after and just sit and talk about everything for 2 hours and just break down everything, because we're not going to see any football for a very long time after that. So I'm thinking, rather than spend that 2 hours driving home, maybe I'll stay home and just do that. I don't know yet. I know that I have to go live at some point. You guys keep telling me that, so maybe that's the time to do it. But we got to talk about this. So I don't know how it is that if you and I went to practice, right, and we both watched the quarterbacks play, we watched Will Howard, we watched Devin, we watched them real close. I don't know how you and I could both come out and say, this guy was clearly better, hands down, he's going to be the guy, and I could come out and say the opposite. Now, we could come out with different opinions, and those different opinions could be, I think Will did better, I think Devin did better, but are we going to both come out and say with utter certainty that this guy's clearly better or this guy's clearly better? Not if we're two educated football fans. I don't think that we would come out with definitive opinions if it was that close, right? We'd say I'm leaning Devin or I'm leaning Will, but Devin did good, vice versa. Well, we got a couple reports here from Friday's practice. And these reports kind of go like this. Will was better. Devin was clearly better. Will was accurate. Will was at the lower end of accuracy for all four quarterbacks. I say four because Air is not participating in team drills, really. Will, clearly the guy. Devin has clearly been the guy almost the entire time, every practice. Lincoln looked great, and he was with the ones. He was doing so good. Lincoln was average, and he was only with the ones because it was his turn in the rotation, which Day told us he was going to be doing, and he has been doing the entirety of practice. The only unanimous thing is Julian is outperforming Air and Lincoln unanimously. So should Will or Devin transfer, it seems pretty clear that Julian is going to be the number 2 here, and he's going to leapfrog Lincoln. You would think, unless he's artificially held back because he's young and small, which, potentially could be it. And Air Noland is where a typical freshman would be, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's where a normal freshman would be, which is not really participating in a whole lot of this stuff because he's not quite ready, which you would expect Julian and him to be at that level, but Julian's just very advanced. And that's fine. But how are these reports so different? I was watching a show the other day, and one of my pals here that watches this show in the comments popped up in the questions, and he said the same thing. How are we seeing such diametrically opposed reports come out of these practices? I don't get it, man. I don't get it. Now, here's my concern. We went through this last year. And we were waiting for that decision and hoping that it was these guys were really both balling out, and it was just hard to decide who was better. When really the decision being made was it was hard to decide who was going to be the better option, not who was better, because they were both so good. I don't know. I hope things are different this season. I'm going to keep holding out hope that it doesn't really matter whoever they decide to go with, because we now have an offensive coordinator whose job it is just to call the offense, doesn't have to do anything else, and who is a master at not just jamming his system down somebody's throat, but adjusting to what they do best. The problem is these two, they're not very similar. They can both move a little bit, but they're not very similar. Dev is a gunslinger. Will has problems downfield. So can he adjust those offenses enough? Should one get hurt? There's a lot going on here, man. I just wish that we knew, but more importantly, I hope that they know. I hope that they know who they're going to go with, or I hope they got a heavy lean at this point. And like I said, I'm rooting for Devin. Devin's our guy. Devin chose us out of high school. Devin has been incredibly loyal. His attitude is second to none. He's a great teammate. I'm rooting for him. I just have always felt like from the beginning, though I'm starting to back up off of this a little bit, that Will is the guy they brought in because they wanted Will to be the starter. Now, depends on which one of these reports is true. If Will is really having this many accuracy issues downfield, obviously, I don't want that. And while I think that Devin is jumpy and jittery and frantic, we haven't seen him with the luxury of being able to start 2 or 3 games to maybe settle himself down a little bit. You watch his high school tape, and I've said it before, it's one of the top 10 quarterback high school tapes I've ever seen in my life. Obviously, a massive difference from high school to college. But when you watch the throws he makes, like, that's not different. That's there. That skill is in him. I would love to see it at this level. We haven't seen it yet, but it's still in there. That dude is in there. And how awful would it be if he went somewhere else, got his opportunity, started those 3 games, settled down, and then all of a sudden that popped out? It would be pretty bad. However, I still think that there's a very good possibility that Devin may stay and not transfer, even if Will is the starter, because he's just that kind of guy, and he's thrown down the gauntlet. He would still have 2 years of eligibility left after that. Now, at that point, I'm not even going to get into it. I'm not even going to get into my Julian Sand thing again. But I don't know, guys. I don't know how things can be so different. But there's a whole lot of people talking about the Buckeyes. And rightfully so, because the odds have been updated. Now, last week, I did a show where I said that Ohio State was the it team, not Georgia. And what I mean by the it team is the team with all the momentum, the team everybody's talking about, the team people are picking to win the national championship. I got clowned. I took a lot of grief on that one, a whole lot. Well, I was right. The odds have come out and been updated at MGM. MGM is the biggest sports book in the nation. And the odds for the national championship are now even Steven at plus 350 for Georgia, plus 350 for Ohio State. So I expect all those apologies from all you Georgia folks in the comments. Now, it's only MGM. The rest of the sports books, they're not there yet. I believe they will catch up, whether they do or they don't. I've been validated in my opinion here that the Buckeyes, and I'm telling you, it's not going to end here. They will go off as the favorites by the time the season starts. And what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything at all. It just proves I'm right, that they are the it team. The public supports them. The smart money supports them. The odds started off at plus 350 for Georgia, plus 700 for Ohio State. And now 40% of the money is on Ohio State. That's because the odds were so clearly off by the odds makers to come out with it in the beginning. And all the smart money came in and bet that down very, very, very quickly. And they got good odds on that. So good for them. They're going to cash. And I hope that our Buckeyes get a chance to take it out on Georgia. Whether they do or they don't, I don't think Georgia's going to be there in the end. I really don't. So they're probably not going to get the option. They're probably not going to be able to do that against Georgia because Georgia won't be there. But our Buckeyes will be cashing. And if you want to make some money, you can bet them now. $100 will get you $350 over at my bookie.
No security, bros with me, no friends. I'm in double limit bed. Walk on social distance, pick, they no coffee. You know me, got that laser beam up in the party. They don't like me, so they told me that she feeling me. She wanna bite me. Keep my ain't plan on killing me. Push it up, these don't fight me.
What's up, brother?
There has been a lot of complaints for a long time that Ohio State's social media department and the way they pump out the product has been lacking, seriously. But they've got it all together this year because these clips they've been releasing are amazing. And the defense, I haven't been this excited for a defense. I can't even remember the last time I've been this excited for a defense. The personnel is so exciting. There are so many exciting players. And the unit coming back from a third ranked in the country unit, now in Jim Knowles' third year, with the depth on the defensive line, adding Caleb, the emergence of CJ and Sonny, hopefully at linebacker, Cody Simon, I think is going to be excellent. I think he should have played more last year. James Laurinaitis acknowledges it. I'm so excited for this defense. But when I was thinking about JJ and thinking about the expectations kind of that I have for him as a freshman, it kind of got me thinking to the best freshman we've ever had and how I felt about those guys when they were coming in and whether or not they kind of reached my personal expectations of what I thought they were going to be. And just going through some of those stories in my mind of when those guys came in, the hype behind them all, each individually, and kind of how it hit me. And it all kind of depended on what age I was at and kind of how connected I was to the program at the time, which varies over the years as I look back. And I just kind of wanted to go through them because there's nothing more fun than seeing these guys come in as freshmen and being immediate stars. Dudes with NFL bodies and the skills to compete, they're just so rare. And I tried to cut it to 4 guys that I wanted to break down, but I couldn't. I had to go with 6. And I started with Beanie, number 1 running back, number 3 overall, 5-star out of Akron Garfield, my hometown boy. I was in on him since he was 16 years old. Beanie looked NFL ready at 16. I mean, his body is just insane. The speed and physicality were so rare. He was listed when he came into Ohio State at 6'1", 225. There are not many human beings like Beanie with that body and that speed and agility. He was so nimble on his feet for a bigger guy. He had a great career and he was a first rounder, but his foot injuries kind of dampened what he could have been, obviously in the NFL, but at Ohio State too. You know, I'll never forget that game out at USC where he was on the sideline waving a towel while we got annihilated. Not that he would have changed that. That was just a great USC team. But Beanie, did he live up to my personal expectations? No, he didn't. I thought he was going to be the next Eddie George. Orlando Pace. I wish that young Buckeye fans would watch highlights of Orlando Pace. I know they hear about this awesome offensive lineman, and that's boring, and they probably don't want to tune in. But man, Orlando was just different. Right off the rip, when you see Orlando in a uniform, it's just so different. How wide he is, how big, even his head, like everything is just enormous on this dude. And he played so nasty. Watching Orlando run block is more fun than watching a whole lot of skill position players highlight clips. I mean, he was just so mean. He ran so fast for a guy that big. And you can just see the reaction in the bodies of the guys. There's a clip, and they're playing Notre Dame. And the Notre Dame defender sees Orlando slip off his first block coming for him. I think he was a linebacker. And you can see in this guy's body language, at first he takes one step towards where the ball is coming, sees Orlando, and just has this hesitation in his body like he's probably never had to feel on a football field because he's like a 250-pound linebacker. It's just different. Obviously, Orlando lived up to everybody's expectations, becoming the greatest lineman in the history of football, and one of just two guys who is pretty much unanimously on everybody's Mount Rushmore, along with Archie, of the top 4 Ohio State players in history. So Orlando, definitely jaw-dropping excitement, and from a lineman, that's amazing, but surely lived up to the expectations. The next one on my list would be Braxton Marcellus Miller, #1 quarterback in the country coming out of Huber Heights. He was probably one of the most elite athletes we'd ever seen. That agility, those moves, that speed from a quarterback was just insane. As far as my expectations, I thought that he would come in and start immediately as a freshman. I thought that he would probably be a driving force behind a national championship. Obviously, his injury made his position different, and he excelled at that position. I think he lived up to my expectations. I think he's underrated. I think because of his personality, he's so quiet. I don't think he's a guy that gets talked about a whole lot. Maybe it's his playing style as well when he was a quarterback, or the fact that he changed positions, but he's a great Buckeye, an all-time legend. But I just don't feel like we talk about him a ton. I don't know when we talk about older players. But yeah, he lived up to my expectations for sure. Terrell was probably, in my opinion, the most hyped, the guy I expected the most from the day we first heard about the guy. Nationally famous as a high school player. His recruitment was nuts. It was all over, everywhere you read. He pulled a fake out when he was going to announce his recruitment or his decision, and he never did. I think he didn't show up or something, but that was a big day and a big bummer. We were all looking forward to that. And then when he finally did commit, unzipped the coat, had the Buckeye shirt on, crazy excitement. And one of the guys that I made sure I went to his first game against Youngstown State and logged in my brain, remember right now that you're watching this guy play his first snaps. A guy that I thought was so different because he was just so big and so fast and could throw good enough that he was going to lead us to a national championship. Did he live up to the expectations that I had for him? No, because he didn't lead us to that national championship. And the stuff with the tattoo gate, for me at the time, it definitely ruined my opinion of him. I was obviously a lot younger and so irritated that they traded after. Listen, coming from my most formative years being the Cooper era, where those gold pants to me were something that was, it was so elusive and it meant so much to me as a guy not even on the team. But trading the gold pants, among other things, for tattoos personally offended me so much at that age that I just couldn't get past it. I couldn't get past it, and I was so angry that Jim Tressel essentially had to take this downfall. Now, he did wrong. He shouldn't have done what he did, I suppose. But it bothers me to this day that he went out like that, even though it probably led to, it leads to Urban, and then Urban leads to kind of bringing the program into the next era, which was great. But I just hate the way he went out. I hate it. And I resented those guys for it. And now that I'm older, that's calmed way down. And now I can look back at him and realize that I started for a while there. I feel like I judged his game and him as a player through that anger that I had with what happened to Jim Tressel through what they did. And I hated on him for a little while there. There was a bit when I hated on him. But looking back, I mean, gosh, these guys were so young, and how silly of me to be irritated for what they did with their own possessions. But I sure was. I was really, really angry. Really angry. And he was excellent, and I underrated him. But did he live up to the expectations that I had for him? No. I definitely thought that he was the type of guy that could definitely lead us to a national championship. Didn't get that done. Awesome Rose Bowl. Awesome Sugar Bowl against Arkansas that, I don't know, that one's not on the books anymore, I guess. But I saw it. It happened. And it was an awesome game. And he seemed to have a really kind of a special relationship with Jim Tressel, which was kind of cool to watch. But didn't live up to my expectations. The guy that was the most exciting out of all these guys for me was Andy Katzenmoyer, National Defensive Player of the Year out of Westerville South, 6'3". I don't know what he weighed when he came out of high school. He was about 255 when he left. But my age, my level of engagement with the team, my favorite position, the type of attitude he played with, for me, Andy Katzenmoyer was the most captivating player in Ohio State football history. I was 16. I was a linebacker in high school. I wanted his horrible tattoo. I wanted his visor. I wanted to wear 45. This is a guy that got to wear Archie's number. I mean, everything about Andy Katzenmoyer, to me, was football Superman. And I thought that he would go on to be the greatest linebacker in the history of the NFL. I mean, Andy Katzenmoyer, to me, was when I saw, look, I interviewed Eli Lee a little while back, and Eli Lee has a picture where he's next to Katzenmoyer on the sideline. And Eli's as big as him, as tall as him. And that just didn't compute with me, because in my brain still, I was 16 years old, and Andy Katzenmoyer was 6'8", 400 pounds of twisted steel. Like, that's what Andy Katzenmoyer was to me. And yeah, he lived up to my expectations. He did, for sure. For sure. Last on my list was Maurice. I was so excited for Maurice Clarett. 5-star, one of the best backs in the country. Hometown boy, not far from where I'm from. Had an attitude about him, which I loved at the time. He and I are about the same age. I was so excited for him. My expectations were that he was going to be the type of freshman that he was. Not a very fast back. In fact, his NFL combine number for his 40 time is pretty abysmal. It's like 4.76, that's not good at all. Doesn't really jive with the guy that I watch on the field, though. He has football speed for sure. So tough, so nasty. The Miami play was, for me, it was the best play in the history of Ohio State football for me, because of the way it felt like watching that game, that at any point they could pop off and we'd be down 21. So the mistakes were, I was watching it with such anxiety that we made no mistakes. Turnover happens, and the deflation from that turnover, only to be elated 4 seconds later when he stripped that ball. It was the greatest football play I've ever seen. I mean, I don't mean it was the greatest football play I've ever seen, but for me, it was the dejection, from that anxiety to that dejection to that elation when he stripped the ball. It was the most amazing 7 to 8 second ride I've ever had in my life. There is no roller coaster that could reach that emotion. And I'll always be thankful for that play, because that is something that you could watch 1,000 football games and never experience an emotional roller coaster like you had on that play right there if you were a Buckeye fan. And it was amazing. But there's a lot of bad associated with him too, you know, and there was a period of time that I couldn't stand him. Before that game, obviously he had a friend die, and me as a young guy, that didn't really compute. The things that he said when he lashed out about Ohio State not flying him back for the funeral, I read the explanation back then, and the explanation was the NCAA prohibited them from doing that. He had to pay for it himself, and then they could file to get it reimbursed or something like that. And it seemed to me like that anger should have been directed at the NCAA. But of course, I don't even know if that's true. And yeah, he was 18. You know, there's no reason I should have been as irritated as I was about that, but I was. And there was a couple things he said, and then the money that he supposedly got, and then trying to sue the NFL. And there was a while I was like, man, I'm so out on this dude, like so out on this dude. And then of course the issues that he had legally, which a lot of it had to do with alcoholism, which I certainly sympathize with. And I'm happy to see that he's got his, you know, everything seems to be going great for him. And that's awesome. And I've certainly changed my tune on him as I've gotten older and more mature. But at the time, you know, did he reach my expectations? No. And I still think he is the all-timer what could have been Buckeye. Every football fan has it on their team, college or pro, and it usually has to do with an injury. But, you know, the what could have been with Maurice Clarett, I mean, he did that as a freshman. He was the most impactful player on the field in a national championship game that had, I don't know, 40 NFL players on the field. And never got to, I don't know, we never got to see the rest of what could have been. And it's a bummer. I'm sure nobody regrets it more than him. But no, he didn't live up to the expectations. So that's what I got. Now, as we move into JJ, what are the expectations for JJ? For me, I don't think that I'm putting crazy expectations when I say I think that he is going to be the best wide receiver to ever play at Ohio State. I don't think that's ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous coming out of my mouth, but just based on what we've seen, his high school stuff, it's the craziest stuff I've ever seen since Randy Moss. That was now 29 years ago. And I still have a hard time believing that that was 29 years ago, but it was. It's better than any wide receiver we've ever had come into the university. And the stuff we've seen since he's been here is crazy. It's crazy. And the crazier part is the reactions that we're seeing from the people who are close. The reactions we're seeing from the people that are close that usually stamp down everybody's, you know, we as fans always feel like, you know, we get excited about freshmen coming in and they can do this. They can be what one of these guys are. One of the guys I just listed. They try to stamp that down because they don't want to put all this expectation on them, because that can turn into fan anger. And everybody, from the players to Ryan Day himself to the journalists that cover it, that, you know, they're the responsible journalists, the ones that are there, and they usually try to, okay, guys, settle down, settle down. They've even thrown up and said, listen, forget it. This guy is that good. And when you hear all these people who are right there saying that, the reaction we see on everybody's faces, his physical tools, the amount of work he puts in, you look at a picture from him when he was 16 and 16 to 18, it's very clear how much work he puts in physically. He doesn't seem to have a whole lot of overt outside interest other than football. The guy seems like a guy who's just dedicated to football. Not to say that other people aren't, because they're interested in a lot of things, but you look at Marvin, and Marvin just kind of had a one-track mind. And it just kind of feels like Jeremiah is very similar in that regard. I expect he's going to be the best wide receiver in the history of the school, because he's going to be starting as a freshman, and I think he can get it done. Now, whether that is going to be the stats, whether the stats are going to match up with that, I don't know. I don't really care. I just feel like he is going to be so dominant and be there when they need him every time. I don't know that you can take him away, because if you try to take him away, they can beat you so many other ways. It's so exciting. It doesn't match my my level of Katzenmoyer excitement. I don't think anything could with that, just because of where I was in my life and, you know, the way I looked up to him. But it's crazy. So that's my expectation. I believe he's going to be the best wide receiver in the history of the school. And I don't think that's crazy to think that. And I just cannot wait till we get into this season to see that. And in a season that is full of so many interesting storylines and so many things that I want to see, it's definitely number one. I want to see what this guy does most out of all of the things. Curious to know what your guys' expectations are, not only for him, but the other guys I talked about. Anybody that you disagree about that reached your expectations that maybe didn't reach mine. Did Mo Claret reach your expectations? I mean, he won us a national championship. How could that not be reaching the expectations? Well, for me, it's because I thought that he was going to be more than that even. Watching him in that year, it was like, I thought he was going to be the best running back we ever had. I know some people still think he is. Some people put him on the Mount Rushmore, which to me is just crazy. But I can understand where they're coming from. But a really interesting conversation. And I should have done this in a live show. This is a good one for a live show to interact while it's happening.
Hey, it's Juck, and MyBookie has some free cash for the Juck on Bucks audience. Open up an account today at MyBookie, and we're going to get a 50% deposit bonus of up to $1,000 in free bets with the promo code JUCK. If you're new to sportsbooks, this is a good one to start at. And if you're an old vet, they got everything we want. It's very simple to use. You can pull out your winnings instantly, and they have an extensive selection of wagering options, including straight bets, parlay bets across sports, odds boosts, and even free plays pop up every now and again. If you like props, they got a whole slew of those, and these guys even got a casino over at MyBookie. And to let us try that out, they got a $10 casino chip with our promo code JUCK. I like to bet some basketball during the tournament for a little bit of fun. I go a little heavier during football season, but no matter what your sport or your favorite wagering option is, you can find it at MyBookie. So open up your account today at MyBookie with the promo code JUCK, because betting is fun, but betting with somebody else's money is even more fun. Check them out.
You're probably wondering why there's a list on the bottom of the screen of Juck on Buck's top 10 college football coaches. And the reason that that's there is because I sat down and kind of said, I need to figure out a way to do this myself so that I'm on record, because I'm about to roast these ESPN writers. 10 ESPN writers just came out with a list of the top 10 college football coaches. And what they did was 10 writers rated coaches 1 to 10. They compiled all the points and they spit out the top 10 list. This list is absolutely absurd, and it goes as such. And keep in mind when I read this that these people get paid to write about college football. Kirby Smart, Kalen DeBoer, Kyle Whittingham, Dabo Swinney, Mike Norvell, Dan Lanning at number 6, Steve Sarkisian at number 7, Lane Kiffin at number 8, Lance Leipold at number 9, Ryan Day at number 10. So Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian, and Lane Kiffin ahead of Ryan Day. I have such an unbelievable problem with that. I can't even begin to explain. Chris Lowe, who is the senior writer at ESPN, points out that his biggest surprise in the rankings was Ryan Day being so low, being that he has won 11 games every year he's been there, except for the COVID year, 2 Big Ten championships, and essentially none of the other guys ahead of him that I just read have any accomplishments whatsoever like that. One of these guys voted Dan Lanning number 3, and his reasoning was he believes he set up his program for future success. But he also has no accomplishments to go with that, while Ryan Day has set up his program for future success, much better than anyone else in the country outside of Kirby Smart, who's number 1, and has accomplishments to go with that, including playoff victories, conference championships in just 5 years. So absolutely absurd. And the worst part about this list is there is a column that says others receiving votes, and 2 of these people voted for Deion Sanders as a top 10 college football coach. So I figured I got to do this myself, and I got to see how hard this is, because if I disagree with Stuart Mandel and Bruce Feldman on their list, which I've talked about before, and this one is so far off base, this must be pretty difficult. And to be honest, it was kind of difficult. But what I did in the list you see on the bottom is not me sitting there ranking them. I went through and I made 3 categories. And I did 1 category for achievements on field, which includes winning percentage, which is kind of weighted to your program expectation, your performance in big games, as an underdog, as a favorite. And I weighted it a little heavier based on recency bias. So the last 3 years is going to count more than the 3 years prior. The second column that I made is your performance as a head coach overall versus the program standard. So what's the norm at your school and how are you performing against that norm? The third column is how well your program is set up for future success. That includes the coaching staff you've hired, your last few recruiting classes, recruiting overall, but the last 3 are going to weigh more than the previous 3. And I did 1 through 10 point system for all of the coaches. I don't know, maybe like the 20 top coaches. And I added it up. Now, obviously, there is very subjective rankings in each one of those columns, but I think it's the fairest way is to have a set criteria and to kind of see how my list turned out versus a couple of my buddies. And I spit it out to them, and we all came back. And to be honest, our lists are very similar, ranking it like this. So I don't know why these guys couldn't just follow a set criteria. But anyway, that's my list, and that's how they came out. I did have a 4th column, and that 4th column was if there are any tiebreakers or any of the rankings that I disagree with, I was allowed to move 1 spot. So there is some subjectivity on the very back end. And that's my list. So now I've put my list down on paper, and I officially don't feel bad anymore roasting these people, because it's not really fair to roast other people's work if you're not going to stick your neck out and say I did it myself too. So there's mine. And as I look at mine, the finished product, there's a couple things I don't like about it, but all in all, I'm pretty pleased with it. I don't think it looks similar to what I think I would have done had and I probably should have done that first. Now that I'll have bias, now that I've seen what I've done already with my point system, but I wish I'd have done it first without any of my point system in my 3 categories. But, this article just went on in some of these guys, the things they say about how they rated these guys. It's just unreal, man. They get paid to write about college football and somehow put Ryan Day as the 10th best coach in the country. It's mind-blowing. Obviously, I'm biased. Ryan Day, you can see, is number 2 on my list. But, I just honestly think that Ryan Day has his program set up for excellent amount of success, which is what they're, rating Dan Lanning on. When you compare him to these other coaches, by the way, Brian Kelly is awfully underrated too. And I get that he's a jerk. But these people, they put Kalen DeBoer and Lance Leipold and raise them on a pedestal for their national championships at lower divisions. Lance Leipold has 6 Division III national championships. Kalen DeBoer has 3 NAIA national championships. Brian Kelly has 2. For some reason, those don't count to anybody when they're rating Brian Kelly, along with his 13 top 20 finishes, winningest coach ever at Notre Dame, won the SEC West in his very first year at LSU. It's kind of mind-blowing to me how Brian Kelly gets so downgraded. I also believe, to be honest, that Brian Kelly is going to – he just copped Missouri's defensive coordinator. They're turning that defense around fast, and I think that LSU is going to be really tough this year. All right, guys, that'll do us for today. So I really wanted to go to the spring game. I even ponied up for better seats, right? Better seats than the normal seats because I wanted to get real close for this one. However, I think that what I really want to do is try to do a post-game show live. And I want to do that because that's what really one of the reasons I started this show is to do that during the season. So I want to give that a practice run. But before that, I've got to give a regular live show a practice run, which I've decided I'm going to do this Wednesday at 12 noon. So if anybody is bumping around online, we're going to do that Wednesday at 12 noon. Hopefully one of my friendlies can pop in here and I can give you one of those wrenches so you can make sure. I'm getting really attacked, guys, from the Michigan folks. They're coming after me hard. They're coming after me hard because that Scarlet and Blue podcast released that video on Twitter. They're not saying very nice things about me. I'll tell you that. It turns out my name rhymes with some other names. And they're all finding that out pretty quick. But hey, listen, if you're going to put yourself out here, you got to be ready to take some of that. And I will take that with the scarlet and gray on my chest any day. That's just what it is. So Wednesday at noon, if anybody's bebopping around, feel free to pop in. And I'm just going to present a normal couple of segments like I do, and then maybe we can do some talking. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Check us out on the podcast format wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be there. I'll download this when I'm done here, and that'll be it. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Juck and Bucks out.